They wouldn't check her in, so she fired the board. In the hushed marble lobby of St. Avalon Private Hospital, Dr. Simone Clark's platinum health card glinted under crystal chandeliers as the receptionist's index finger tapped dismissively on her keyboard. "Your appointment is canceled," came the clipped reply, no eye contact, no explanation. A pregnant silence stretched between the columns of polished stone, broken only by Simone's calm inhale. Around her, suited executives and quietly anxious patients paused, sensing the raw unfairness of it all. A loyal patient CEO, a vital core health leader of billion-dollar healthcare innovations, reduced to a protocol footnote in a moment of institutional bias. In that heartbeat, the stage was set for reckoning and justice that could not be ignored. If you believe that prejudice should never go unanswered, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and share what would you do if they tried to erase your worth. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through St. Avalon's soaring atrium painting golden highlights on the marble floors. Simone Clark stepped forward with measured grace, her bespoke lab coat draped over one arm, platinum ID card in hand. She navigated past plush waiting chairs and discreetly uniformed staff, pausing only to offer polite nods to fellow patrons who recognized her by reputation, if not by face. After all, this was the hospital she had partnered with to pilot VitalCore's telehealth units pods that delivered emergency care to rural communities hours from any clinic. She'd sat with the board of trustees just last quarter, steering allocation of millions for state-of-the-art MRI suites. Here she was not just a patient, she was a benefactor, a catalyst for healing innovation. Yet today her credentials meant nothing. The receptionist's fingers flying over a touchscreen did not look up. "Dr. Clark," she said, voice flat. "We've had to cancel several appointments this afternoon. We're full." Her words echoed like an accusation. Simone's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but her tone remained polite. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake," she replied. "My appointment was confirmed last week with your patient services director." She slid the confirmation email across the counter. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Simone's badge, then away, like a bird avoiding a predator's gaze. 2 minutes passed in clinical stillness. The receptionist tapped a few more keys, then shrugged as though Simone's presence was an inconvenience she'd rather not manage. "There's nothing I can do," she said, returning to her phone as though Simone were a drop of rain on an already full pavement. "Please check back tomorrow." Simone's pulse quickened as indignation coiled behind her ribs, but she held herself still, every inch the composed professional. She recalled the first time she'd pitched VitalCore's remote diagnostics to a skeptical hospital CFO who dismissed her because of her youth, and she now suspected her race. Back then, she'd let results speak louder than prejudice. This time, however, she knew that a silent concession was not an option. She leaned in just enough for the microphone to catch her voice. "Could you please tell me who made this decision?" Simone asked. Calm but firm. "I'd like to speak with the person responsible." The receptionist's lips parted as though Simone's request were a riddle she hadn't been trained to solve. Nearby, a corporate lawyer waiting with a platinum card of his own looked up, eyebrows knitting in surprise. The hospital's waiting area hummed with quiet energy, the distant chime of the elevator doors, the murmur of anxious families, the metallic click of a wheelchair's wheels painting restless patterns on the terrazzo. Simone allowed herself a single deep breath to steady her resolve. She checked her watch, 3 minutes since the snub. In those 60 heartbeats, she'd already decided this micro-injustice would become more than social media fodder. It would become policy. Without a word, she turned and stepped across the lobby to the nurses' station at the far end. The concierge desk might refuse her. These nurses and the floor manager behind them could not. The receptionist glared but made no move to stop her. Simone's heels clicked on the tile, each step echoing in the cathedral quiet space. At the nurse's station, she found a young woman in scrubs, reviewing charts. Simone cleared her throat. "I need to see your patient services director immediately," she said softly. The nurse looked up, startled by Simone's sudden appearance and by the urgency in her voice. "Dr. Clark," she said. "Of course." She tapped a call button on her desk. Within moments, a sharply tailored administrator emerged. Mr. Harris, the man whose email confirmation had cleared Simone's visit days ago. Simone. "I'm so sorry." he began, voice laden with genuine regret. There was a scheduling glitch in the system. He gestured back toward the receptionist's desk. Please let me fix this. Simone paused, the apex of her plan within reach. She studied Harris's expression, concern edging into discomfort. I appreciate that, Simone said, her voice soft but deliberate. But I want more than an override. Her eyes locked onto his. We need a systemic fix. No patient, regardless of their position or background, should ever be turned away without cause. The word background hung in the air like a challenge. Harris swallowed, nodding slowly. Absolutely. Let's discuss right now how to update our scheduling policies and train our staff on equitable treatment. He led her to a quiet conference room off the main lobby, the same room where weeks ago he and his team had greenlit the Vital Core pilot. Simone closed the door behind her, turning on her heels to face him fully. Good, she said, letting relief and triumph soften her posture. I'll draft the proposal with my team. We'll present it to your board by this afternoon. Harris's jaw dropped at the audacity of the timeline, but he knew better than to argue. He extended his hand and Simone shook it firmly. Back at the reception desk, the receptionist watched the exchange through the glass partition. When Simone reappeared a few minutes later, she carried a signed memorandum of understanding and agreement that St. Avalon would revise its appointment system and conduct bias awareness training within 30 days. The receptionist's eyes widened. Simone offered a brief, courteous smile before retrieving her appointment slip. As Simone's footsteps once again clicked toward the treatment wing, the lobby's energy shifted. Other patients offered nods of respect. The head nurse whispered a heartfelt thank you, and the receptionist stared at the glossy memorandum as if it were a page out of a revelation. Simone's stride remained steady. Her dignity reclaimed, her mission advanced. In under 10 minutes, she had transformed personal indignity into institutional reform. As she disappeared down the hallway, her platinum card safely pocketed the hushed lobby, stood witness to a new truth that when equality is denied, only decisive action can restore it. Late afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Avalon's reception hall, casting fractured rainbows across the polished marble floor. Simone Clark stepped from the shadows into that glass-lit glow, her posture unhurried and resolute, a walking testament to calm command. Draped over one arm was her crisp white lab coat, the Vital Core Health logo embroidered in iron gray thread just above the pocket. At her lapel, a gleaming CEO badge reflected the kaleidoscope at her feet, a discreet but unmistakable emblem of the billions she had helped bring to telemedicine innovation. Each click of her designer heels on the marble tile marked her arrival like a drumbeat, steady, unwavering, impossible to ignore. Simone paused for a moment at the entrance, letting her eyes take in the soaring ceilings and the hushed hum of stethoscopes and computer fans far beyond the reception area. Here in this private hospital sanctuary, life and science intertwined. But while the institution embraced cutting-edge diagnostics and robotic surgery, its doors today had swung shut in her face. That dismissive, "Your appointment is canceled," still lingered in her ears, a bitter note in an otherwise harmonious world of healthcare progress. As she advanced toward the reception desk, a sleek expanse of walnut and steel Simone's hand reached inside her tote for the essentials, her platinum health card, the email confirmation from the patient services director, and a printed memo outlining her partnership with St. Avalon's board. She arranged them neatly in her grasp, each piece of paper and plastic a chord in the symphony of her credentials. Behind the desk, the receptionist glanced up, once eyes flicking from Simone's badge to the stack of cards and documents without a flicker of recognition or apology. The automated nameplate beside her read, Ms. Harper, and her name tag carried a simple flourish of cursive. She offered Simone a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes, a mask worn by those who believed their script gave them power. Simone inclined her head in greeting. "Good afternoon," she said, voice warm but controlled. "I'm here for my 3 Azuru appointment with Dr. Patel for the cardiac follow-up." She extended her health card across the counter, laying it gently on the sanitized surface. A second later, the receptionist's neatly manicured hand swept it aside as if flicking dust from an unwanted table. The motion was infinitesimal yet deliberate. It conveyed more than any words could that Simone was not welcome. No urgency in the receptionist's movements, no flicker of unease, only the smooth disinterest of someone who believed protocol carried more weight than human dignity. Simone's pulse remained steady, but her mind raced. She thought of every life Vital Corps' remote monitoring pods had saved the diabetic grandmother in rural Wyoming, who received an insulin adjustment via satellite transmission, the stroke survivor in Appalachia, whose vital signs triggered an ambulance dispatch before her speech returned. She thought of the millions she'd invested in making healthcare accessible and of the countless conferences where she'd sat beside leaders in medicine advising them on the future of patient outcomes. And yet here she was, reduced to a canceled appointment and a polite shrug. The receptionist tapped a sequence of keys on her touchscreen console, a device that digitized every aspect of the hospital's operations, yet could not account for the simplest courtesy. Simone watched the screen flash a roster full of booked slots and empty waits, but hers miraculously had vanished. It felt like a magician's trick removed the card erased the presence. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. A soft whoosh from the air purifiers overhead, the distant squeak of rubber wheels on linoleum, the tinny echo of the PA system announcing the next surgery. These sounds formed the backdrop to a scene that was collapsing under its own contradictions. St. Avalon, a bastion of precision medicine, had misfired in its most fundamental duty, treating every patient with respect. Simone met the receptionist's practiced calm with an unwavering gaze. "I believe there's been a system error," she said, voice low enough that only those nearby could catch its steel undertone. "My appointment was confirmed via email by your own patient services director just 2 days ago. Can you please reconcile your schedule with my confirmation?" The receptionist's fingers paused mid-air. She drew a breath as though to recite the same policies she'd been taught, but Simone's gaze held her silent. No script could fill the empty space between what was written and what was right. Behind Simone, a mother clasped a child's hand, eyes wide with curiosity. Elsewhere, a suited executive glanced up from his tablet, sensing drama in the making. Simone felt the weight of their stares not as pressure, but as a gathering wind that bolstered her resolve. After what felt like an eternity folded into moments, the receptionist tapped her screen again. Her eyes flicked back to Simone's badge. I'm afraid the system shows no record of your name for today," she said, voice clipped. "It's full. We can see you tomorrow at 10:00. Simone's jaw tightened. She slid the printed email across the desk so the receptionist could read the sender's domain at stavalonhealth.org. Above the signature, the hospital's COO had typed, "We look forward to your cardiac consultation. Please arrive at 3:00 p.m. this Thursday. TK." The receptionist's expression flickered surprise, confusion, guilt in a single shuddering moment. But then she recovered as though deciding Simone's evidence was an annoyance she need not entertain. She reached out to swipe the email aside, but Simone's hand stopped her fingers poised. "Please," Simone said, voice gentle but unyielding, "pull up today's schedule under Dr. Patel's name. You'll find my slot coded VIP for Vital Corps Partner. If you can't see it on the main screen, perhaps the override console behind the desk will help." The receptionist glanced sideways at a back-of-house door emblazoned admin only. Beyond it sat the override terminal, accessible only to managers. Simone watched the recognition dawn in the receptionist's eyes, and the fleeting hope that she could rectify this with a click of a higher-level login. But if Simone wanted real change, she would need a higher-profile ally than the woman behind the counter. Simone's eyes softened as she spoke into her discreet earpiece, Maria stand by the director's office. "I'm coming." She turned on her heel and walked toward the hallway leading to executive suites, her steps purposeful. The receptionist opened her mouth as though to protest, but Simone's steady back silenced her. Each stride carried Simone past framed photographs of St. Avalon's medical milestones, the first robotic surgery, groundbreaking gene therapy trials, the ribbon cutting of the new pediatric wing. Irony hovered in those images, triumph in science, failure in simple respect. At the corridor's end, Simone found the door marked Patient Services Director. She paused, took a deep breath, then knocked twice. The door swung open to reveal Mr. Harris, the very man who had sent the confirmation email. Relief and embarrassment warred on his face as he stepped aside. "Simone," he said, voice hushed. "I'm so sorry." He motioned her in his banishment of the receptionist's error, already clear in his hurried apology. "I can fix this, and more than that, I'll ensure the policy changes we discussed go into effect immediately." Inside his sunlit office walls lined with framed commendations and research citations, Simone closed the door. She laid the signed Memorandum of Understanding on his desk, the same strategy she'd used to secure that first Vital Core pilot, and she watched as Harris's expression shifted from contrition to determination. In that private room surrounded by the very portraits of medical advancement that St. Avalon cherished, Simone Clark did not merely reclaim her appointment, she secured the promise of a fairer system for every patient who followed. And as she turned back toward the lobby, badge gleaming in the refracted light, the hospital's corridors seemed narrower, the polished floors closer to the glass ceiling she had just cracked. Today, her credentials had done more than open doors, they had rewritten the rules. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the tall windows of St. Avalon's reception hall, gilding the marble floor with shards of gold and amber. Dr. Simone Clark stood before the sleek walnut desk, her posture as controlled as a concert pianist poised above the keys. Yet beneath her composed exterior, a storm brewed. The receptionist, her name tag reading Ms. Lawson, sat behind dual monitors, hands poised above a keyboard, her eyes glued to the pixelated glow, rather than to the CEO standing mere feet away. Simone extended her platinum health card, and the email confirmation once more willing the gesture to bridge the chasm of indifference. But Lawson's gaze remained fixed on the screen, fingers dancing against the desk, as though Simone's presence were a background glitch in her programmed routine. "Your slot's gone," the receptionist murmured, not even bothering to lift her head. Her tone was flat, automatic, as if she were announcing the weather. The cursor on the monitor blinked mockingly on an empty timetable where Simone's appointment had once been clearly stamped Dr. Clark, 3:00 p.m., room 407. Simone's breath caught for the first time. The words felt like a physical blow. Not only had her name vanished from the roster, but her legitimacy seemed erased along with it. She watched other patients, young mothers clutching their toddlers, elderly couples with urgent lambent hope in their eyes, approach Lawson's station and glide past without so much as a second glance. Each one reaffirmed what the receptionist's dismissal had already declared: Simone Clark, Dr. Innovator, and valued patient, had been stripped of her place in this carefully ordered world. The lobby's hushed atmosphere amplified every nuance. A grandfather wheeled his granddaughter toward Lawson, the child's eyes wide with curiosity, and Lawson smiled at them, a warmth that had never touched Simone. A businessman in a tailored suit breezed in behind Simone, flashed his insurance card, and was shown to the examination rooms with deferential efficiency. Simone absorbed it all in a single heartbeat protocol, for them prejudice for her. Her pulse thrummed beneath the tailored fabric of her blazer. She could feel its rhythm in her throat, a quiet insistence that demanded her next move. Yet she held herself still, refusing to let the receptionist's slights cheapen the years of trust she'd invested in this institution. As a physician herself and the CEO of Vital Core Health, she understood how easy it was for systems built on data and algorithms to fail on the most human of fronts. Miss Lawson, Simone began, voice even, but firm. "I see that my appointment has been removed. I need to understand why." The receptionist's fingers hesitated above the keyboard. At last she clicked the mouse and leaned back as though unraveling Simone's credentials were the most tedious task imaginable. "There was an internal scheduling update," she said, her voice droning. "Your appointment was canceled due to a conflict in patient tiers. You can reschedule online." Simone fought the urge to scoff. "Patient tiers," she echoed. "I hold a platinum card," she tapped the badge at her lapel, "endorsed by your own patient services director. I have partners on your board who confirm my consultation. There is no conflict that I have authorized." Lawson's mouth twitched as if Simone's calm evidence upset her. Yet she refused to meet Simone's eyes. "I'm simply following the new protocol." She replied more to the screen than to Simone. "I have no authority to override it." Simone inhaled slowly, centering herself. She watched the receptionist's screen, noting the pale blue lines of text and the grayed-out slots. The institution had reduced her to a blank line, unwanted data. She felt the weight of it, the unfairness like an electric charge. If she allowed this to stand, not only would her appointment slip away, but the message would echo throughout the halls of St. Avalon that even those who built the future of healthcare could be rendered invisible. She took a step closer, her heels clicking once on the marble, a single sharp note that drew a few curious glances. "Ms. Lawson," she said, activating the earpiece hidden beneath her hair, reach out to my chief of staff. I'm triggering a patient escalation alert. For a moment, Lawson's composure cracked. She set her fingertips on the desk as if bracing herself. The cursor stopped blinking, frozen mid-pulse, as though the machine itself sensed the shift in energy. A terrified flicker passed through Lawson's eyes, an acknowledgement that Simone's calm defiance carried real weight. Before Lawson could utter another rehearsed excuse, Simone produced her phone and held it aloft, the screen displaying an email draft addressed to the hospital's COO. The subject line read, Patient escalation unauthorized cancellation of Dr. Simone Clark's appointment. The body of the message listed every piece of incontrovertible evidence, the confirmation email, the board memoranda, her platinum tier status, and a clear demand for immediate reinstatement or an executive-level explanation. Simone's fingers hovered over the send icon, but she hesitated, choosing her moment. I would rather not escalate this publicly, she said, voice carrying through the lobby. But if I must, I will ensure every patient who passes through these doors hears why a valued CEO was denied care. The threat rang louder than any raised voice. In the seconds that followed, two distinct changes rippled across the lobby. First, Lawson straightened, shooting a glance toward the door marked executive offices. Second, the distant hum of the ventilation system seemed to swell, as though the building itself exhaled. Other patients and visitors, previously engrossed in their own affairs, paused mid-step. Some whispered to one another. Others craned their necks, phones glinting as they tilted screens in Simone's direction. The energy in the room shifted. This was no longer a private bureaucratic glitch, but a public reckoning unfolding in real time. Lawson's fingers flew across the keyboard, opening program windows and toggling between schedules. She whispered into her headset a low rush of words that Simone could not decipher, but that telegraphed urgent action. The screen blinked, and suddenly a new line appeared. Dr. Simone Clark, 3:00 p.m., room 407, confirmed. Simone's gaze remained on Lawson as the receptionist closed the email window and looked up finally. Cheeks tinged pink. Her eyes met Simone's. She offered the barest nod of contrition. Your slot is back, she stammered. I apologize for the confusion. Simone inclined her head, the slightest curve of a diplomat's courtesy. She didn't accept the apology just yet. There was still reckoning to be done, but she acknowledged the change in reality. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. I expect to see our new non-discrimination protocol in place before my next visit. Good day? Without another word, Simone turned on her heel and strode toward the hallway, leading to the executive wing, her lab coat swinging behind her like a flag of victory. Behind her, the lobby buzzed anew. Phones murmured, visitors exchanged astonished glances, and even the distant drip of a water cooler sounded slighter, more hopeful. In that single charged moment, the injustice had been snubbed, and the system had blinked. Underneath the veneer of efficiency and care, St. Avalon Private Hospital found itself forced to confront its own contradictions. Simone Clark had not merely restored her appointment, she had illuminated the fragile line between protocol and prejudice, and shown that dignity once challenged would not cower. It would rise luminous and unyielding beneath the golden light of an afternoon sky. Late afternoon light softened against the polished marble of St. Avalon's lobby. But inside Dr. Simone Clark, a tempest raged. Her pulse pounded like war drums in her temples, each beat a reminder of every boardroom she had led, every hospital wing she had redesigned, every life she had saved. She had briefed presidents on pandemic response, negotiated multi-million-dollar public-private partnerships to expand rural healthcare, and personally overseen telemedicine rollouts that connected remote villages with specialist clinicians. Yet here, standing before an austere receptionist's desk, all of that history felt stripped away, replaced by an all-too-familiar equation: black woman plus stranger behind glass equals suspicion. She took a measured breath, steadying herself. The faint scent of antiseptic clung to the air, a sterile promise of healing that now felt hollow. Around her, the hospital's grand pianos of warm wood and brass fixtures spoke of compassion and service. Yet the receptionist's curt dismissal had turned those symbols into a hollow facade. Simone's reflection shimmered in the mirrored panels behind the desk. Her tailored blazer, gleaming lapel pin, and poised posture transformed into an image of affronted authority. The cursor blinked mockingly on Lawson's screen, an empty slot where Simone's appointment had once been. It reminded her of code in software that had been deprecated, rendered obsolete by a bureaucracy's whim. But she was no deprecated protocol. She was a creator of systems that saved lives. Her company, Vital Core Health, had grown from a scrappy startup into a billion-dollar innovator for remote diagnostics. She had hired her first engineers in a cramped co-working space 5 years ago, and now they fielded calls from United Nations task forces and Fortune 500 partners alike. And yet a receptionist's indifference had reduced her to canceled. The indignity crackled beneath her skin like static electricity. She felt each stifled whisper and sideways glance in the lobby as if it were a physical weight pressing on her shoulders. There, the young mother clutching her child paused mid-stride, eyebrows knitting into concern. Here, the surgeon in scrubs glanced up from his phone, offering Simone a sympathetic tilt of the head before rushing to a nearby elevator. Justice, it seemed, recognized her more swiftly than protocol did. Simone leaned forward, letting her fingers trace the polished edge of the desk. The cold surface anchored her. In that small, tactile moment, she remembered the first time she'd stepped onto a hospital floor as a medical student, hands trembling beneath her white coat, eyes racing to take in the maze of corridors. She'd terror-tested prototypes of patient triage apps on cadavers in anatomy labs. She'd juggled grant proposals by day and night shifts by night, driven by the vow that no patient would ever feel that frightening disorientation again. That night in the bowels of the teaching hospital, she'd witnessed her first true moment of vulnerability, a 9-year-old boy convulsing from a high fever, parents huddled in agonized prayer. Her supervisor had barked instructions, and Simone, with 2 minutes' notice, had administered the life-saving anticonvulsant that stabilized him. In that moment, she realized medicine was more than science. It was a covenant of trust, and trust had betrayed her here. She rose an inch on her toes, refusing to be flattened by the receptionist's scorn. The ritual of compromise, smiles, nods, polite apologies was not in her arsenal today. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but carried the weight of steel. Ms. Lawson, I've been canceled without cause. I request to speak with your supervisor immediately. Lawson's fingers froze over the keyboard. For the first time, she looked up, her eyes flickering with something not quite regret, but unease. Simone noted the moment like a machine recognizing an anomaly. Her presence had broken the receptionist's programmed routine. In the seconds that stretched between them, Simone saw Lawson's reflection in the same mirrored panels, a woman accustomed to control now confronted with the tremor of accountability. Within that image, Simone glimpsed the fissure that prejudice carves into institutions. The receptionist was trapped, too bound by directives that carried the weight of centuries of bias. Simone straightened fully her height, commanding the space. "I will wait," she said calmly. "My appointment was scheduled months in advance. I've delivered urgent telehealth services to your patients. I deserve the same courtesy." Lawson's jaw flexed as she swallowed the retort. She rose from behind the desk, an imperceptible tremor in her posture, and tapped her headset. "Yes, supervisor," she intoned, voice hollow. Then a soft click, and she whispered a sequence of words that Simone could only catch. Fragments of board, override. "Dr. Clark." Simone closed her eyes for an instant, letting the lobby's hush settle around her. The sheer absurdity of her predicament, an innovator in life-saving tech denied entry to a hospital, stung deeper than any boardroom rejection. She recalled the day she'd pitched Vital Core to a panel of venture capitalists, one after another, dismissing her because of her age or her accent. She'd endured microaggressions in lab meetings and outright hostility in executive corridors. Each time she'd fought back with data, with prototypes, with undeniable results, lower mortality rates, higher patient satisfaction scores, streamlined workflows. Here in this moment, her proof lay not in spreadsheets, but in her very presence. The executive chair she had built, tempered by research forged by empathy, was shattered by this receptionist's whim. Yet she refused to let that break her spirit. She could rebuild trust in a heartbeat. She had done it for entire healthcare systems. Simone opened her eyes. Lawson's supervisor, a middle-aged woman in a navy blazer, approached with brisk steps and unreadable expression. She paused before Simone, offering a curt nod. "Dr. Clark," she said, voice measured. "I understand there's been an unfortunate error. We will reinstate your appointment immediately." Simone studied the supervisor's face. Was it relief or the faintest flicker of shame? She let a small smile grace her lips, not of triumph, but of recognition that change could start here. "Thank you," Simone replied. "I also expect a review of the policies that allowed me to be canceled without notice. If St. Avalon is to remain a beacon of care, it must honor every patient equally." The supervisor inclined her head. Behind her, Lawson's shoulders slumped in what might be the first genuine apology Simone had received today. The lobby's quiet breath exhaled cataracts of tension dissipated as the scheduling software blinked Simone's slot back into life. Simone watched the screen, Dr. Simone Clark, 3:30 p.m. consultation room. Her appointment was restored, but her mission extended far beyond that. She nodded once, sharply signaling the moment of resolution. Then, turning smoothly on her heel, she strode toward the executive elevators, her footsteps steady, resonant, a metronome of dignity reclaimed. In the reflective panels lining the corridor, Simone's figure receded into the distance, framed by the hushed grandeur of St. Avalon. Behind her, the receptionist's desk stood empty, a silent testament to the fissure between procedure and prejudice. But Simone Clark had bridged that divide with a single unwavering act demanding respect where it was owed. And as she pressed the button for the executive floor, the echo of her heels whispered a promise to every patient and provider in the hospital that no system, however well-intended, could remain impervious to accountability. The inner storm had roared, and in its wake a fresh breeze of justice began to blow. Dr. Simone Clark's gaze drifted to the antique clock mounted high on the marble wall. Its slender hands ticked in deliberate intervals. Tick. One patient glanced her way. Talk, a nurse paused mid-stride behind frosted glass. Tick, another visitor raised a curious eyebrow. Each beat of that clock hammered the question into Simone's mind. How long would this injustice stand? The cavernous lobby, usually a gentle current of muted conversations, and the susurrus of rolling luggage now felt charged an arena of unspoken conflict. Velvet ropes fluttered faintly in the air-conditioned draft, confining Simone to a space that should never have held her captive. She exhaled so quietly she dared not disturb the hush, but she could feel the tension gathering around her like storm clouds. A well-heeled couple, coats draped elegantly over their arms, paused at the edge of the waiting area. The woman's diamond earrings caught the soft light as she offered Simone a sympathetic smile before her companion tugged her onward toward the elevators. Simone returned the gesture, a nod of gratitude for solidarity, in a place that had turned cold. In another moment, she spotted a courier in crisp scrubs busy tapping at a tablet labeled Critical Care, who peeked from behind a swinging door and froze at the sight of her. The door clicked softly as it closed, the silhouette of a hand pressed against the glass in silent support. Every micro-reaction coalesced into a crescendo of awareness. Here was a leader undone by mere bureaucracy. Here was a hospital's promise to care wilting under the glare of everyday bias. Simone felt a familiar surge, not anger exactly, but the cold, precise ignition of resolve. She imagined those nurses' voices, hushed gossip, translating her trial into code. Dr. Clark canceled no check-in. Soon that code would broadcast across hospital networks, echoing in boardrooms and press rooms far beyond St. Avalon. She brushed a fingertip against her CEO badge, Vital Core Health's emblem of connectivity and compassion. Its weight rested against her chest like both an anchor and a banner. She thought of the telemedicine pods her company had installed in underserved clinics, pods that transmitted real-time vitals across continents. She thought of the pregnant mothers in Niger who had sent midnight SOS messages through her apps saved in the dawn by remote specialists she'd rallied in New York and Geneva. And now, ironically, she was stranded mere yards from a treatment center her work had helped build. Simone shifted her stance, the soft leather of her pumps, sighing against the marble floor. She met the receptionist's gaze again. Lawson's eyes flickered over to the clock and back, as if counting down her own seconds until resolution. Beneath that gaze, Simone sensed the receptionist's discomfort, an involuntary tremor in Lawson's posture that betrayed a flicker of conscience. Protocol had failed them both, but Simone was determined not to let protocol stand unchallenged. Another tick. A frail, elderly man, cane in hand, hobbled past, pausing to clear his throat. "Are you all right, Dr. Clark?" he whispered with genuine concern. Simone offered a reassuring smile. "Thank you," she replied, voice tender but firm. "I will be." The man nodded and continued on his faith in her unspoken but palpable. She noticed the security cameras in the corners of the lobby swivel at her, as if they too recognized that this was more than a dinner party spat over a lost reservation. This was about identity and entitlement, about whether the pillars of a healing institution could withstand the weight of their own policies. Hospitals prided themselves on equality of care, yet here a receptionist's whim had nullified weeks of planning and payment. A hush fell over the lobby, again as the head nurse emerged, her crisp white coat fluttering in the draft. She stopped at the edge of the reception desk, arms folded, eyebrows knitted in an expression Simone knew well. Battle-tested exhaustion. "Dr. Clark," she said softly, leaning in as if to share a secret, "you don't deserve this." Simone inclined her head, letting the words settle. Here was an ally who understood that compassion was more than a slogan. It was a responsibility. Simone's pulse steadied. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling the antiseptic sweet air that smelled of healing and possibility. Memories surfaced the first time she'd led a medical team through a hurricane's aftermath, improvising hospitals and flooded gyms. The first time she'd presented to a board dominated by aloof executives, walking in as the youngest member and leaving as the architect of a multi-million-dollar expansion. In every challenge, she had harnessed precision and empathy. Today's standoff was simply another field to conquer. Opening her eyes, Simone straightened her jacket and took a single step forward, an imperceptible shift that carried the weight of her lineage, a granddaughter of civil rights organizers, a daughter of pharmacists who ran a clinic for uninsured families. Each step they had taken for justice echoed in her bones. Every whispered glance in the lobby was a call to arms. "This is not over," her eyes seemed to say to every witness in the room. Another talk. The lobby clock marked the passing time and the urgency of her plight. Simone unclipped her earpiece in one smooth motion, clasping it in her hand. She raised her voice just enough to carry Ms. Lawson. "I've been asked to wait long enough. Please direct me to the administrator on duty." The receptionist flinched, her practiced detachment unraveling in the face of Simone's composed insistence. Behind Lawson, the blank schedule flickered on the monitor as if reconsidering its refusal. Simone stepped closer, her presence pressuring the cursor to blink hesitantly. She wasn't asking, she was demanding visibility, for the record that no one in power could treat her as though she were invisible. A final tick. The soft click of the receptionist's headset signaled an incoming directive. Simone exhaled once. Around her, the lobby held its breath, each occupant corralled by curiosity and the unspoken promise that a moment of transformation was at hand. And in that pregnant silence, Simone Clark stood ready, her dignity intact, her will unbroken, poised to turn prejudice into policy, one precise demand at a time. The rising tension that had electrified the lobby now pulsed in her veins, charging her toward the moment when justice at last would arrive. Simone lowered her voice, yet each syllable rang out with the precision of a gavel hitting wood. The marble lobby seemed to contract around her, its cool expanses closing in like the walls of a courtroom. She fixed the receptionist, Miss Lawson, with a steady gaze, unblinking, unshakable. "Please show me the policy canceling my appointment." Simone said, her tone clipped but controlled. Her words carried the weight of boardroom verdicts and UN resolutions, yet delivered with the elegance of a diplomat. She extended her hand toward the desk, palm open, inviting the document that would justify this affront. Lawson's fingers trembled over the laminated appointment schedule. She swallowed, glancing around as though hoping for a rescue. Behind her, the faint hum of fluorescent lights underscored the rising tension. Other patients stiffened in their seats. A nurse paused in the hallway, ear cocked to the confrontation. No one dared intervene. Overbooking Lawson managed at last, her voice thin. She cleared her throat. "Our system automatically reassigns slots when capacity is exceeded. It was a system error. I don't have it on hand." Simone's eyes narrowed. She leaned in just slightly, allowing the hush of the lobby to accentuate her resolve. "System error," she repeated softly, each word dissected by the minds around her. "If it's a system error, then show me the notification, the internal memo, the updated schedule. Otherwise, I must assume this error is no more than a pretext." A bead of sweat formed at Lawson's temple. She tapped keys on her terminal, the screen's glow reflecting in her panicked eyes. Simone observed the cursor flicker, but the monotone background of patient check-ins and electronic beeps filled the void. The system St. Avalon's vaunted digital scheduler throbbed in silence, unwilling to betray its secrets. Simone's presence was magnetic. The head nurse, clad in white scrubs, hovered just beyond the reception counter. She withdrew a clipboard as though ready to scrawl down statements. A visiting doctor ID badge swinging from his neck paused in mid-step, phone in hand. Even the hospital's janitor, pushing a polished cart, stopped to watch the exchange unfold. Every eye was on Simone. Every breath in the lobby seemed synchronized with her next move. She allowed a fraction of a second to pass thin as a razor's edge before speaking again. "I am not here to debate policy. I am only requesting transparency. If your system has failed me, I need to know why. If your staff has misjudged me, I need to know who is accountable." Lawson's lips parted, and she began to speak only to falter. I could reschedule you for next week." Simone interrupted, her voice cool but steely. "My schedule cannot accommodate a next week. I flew in specifically for this consultation. I am not asking for special treatment. I am demanding the respect that every patient deserves." A murmur rippled through the lobby. Simone could feel the electricity in the air, an unseen current of indignation and solidarity. For a moment, time slowed. The distant squeak of a wheelchair stopped. The rustle of paperwork stilled. The tick of the clock seemed hesitant. All awaited Lawson's response. The receptionist's shoulders hunched as she glanced up at Simone, shame and fear warring in her eyes. She scrolled through the digital scheduler, then tapped a toolbar and opened a PDF hospital capacity policy. The document appeared on screen, dense with clauses about emergency triage and staff allocation. Nothing about canceling appointments without notification. Simone scanned the lines, her mind parsing each provision. Nothing here justified Lawson's curt dismissal. She stood straighter, pressing the advantage of the moment. This policy clearly addresses emergency reallocations and overbooking protections for urgent care, Simone said, voice measured. It does not authorize unilateral cancellation of a patient's appointment, especially without notice. You'll need to provide the specific protocol under which my reservation was canceled. Lawson's fingers hovered above the keyboard, breath quickening. She clicked to another tab, but it wasn't a policy. It was an internal bulletin stamped "Confidential Listing Routine Scheduling Updates." As she clicked, the words "Confidential, do not distribute" flashed on the monitor. Simone seized on it. "Confidential," she repeated. "Are you telling me that the very protocols governing my care are hidden from me, the patient? That doesn't instill confidence?" A ripple of agreement moved through the small crowd, nods from other patients. Sympathetic clucks from the nurse. Simone felt the momentum shifting. What had begun as an isolated humiliation was transforming into a public call for accountability. Lawson looked as though she might crumble. She closed her eyes, took a shallow breath, and clicked one more window. There. Executive privilege exception. An internal policy that granted expedited appointments to executives under certain circumstances. Simone recognized the header from the orientation materials she'd reviewed before her flight. "Here," Simone said, pointing to the screen. "This, where it reads, 'Executives identified with a platinum health card shall be guaranteed priority access. Any cancellation must be accompanied by written authorization from the chief medical officer. You have neither shown me that authorization nor given me notice. So again I ask, where is the CMO's written authorization?" Silence. Even the distant beeping of medical devices seemed to pause. Lawson's gaze flicked to the hospital's glossy crest on the receptionist's desk, a coat of arms proclaiming compassion, integrity, excellence. It felt like a monument mocking her. She closed the policy window, swallowed, and turned off the monitor. The screen went black. Simone allowed herself the smallest of head tilts, her jaw set. No document, no notice, no justification. "In the absence of those, I consider my appointment valid. I expect to be checked in immediately, or I will escalate this to the board of directors." At those words, the head nurse stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Dr. Clark, if I may," she said, voice gentle. "I apologize on behalf of the hospital. I will personally escort you to the CMO's office." Simone nodded, acknowledging the olive branch without relinquishing her stance. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate your assistance." As Simone followed the nurse toward the private corridor, the receptionist sank into her chair, head in hands. The lobby exhaled tense bodies, relaxing conversations, whispering back to life. Simone's composed confrontation had pierced the barrier of silenced injustice. Before she turned the corner, Simone glanced over her shoulder at the waiting room. She saw not the indifferent faces from moments before, but a cross-section of humanity, an elderly man offering a nod of respect, a young mother clutching her child's hand, the visitation courier offering a faint thumbs up. Their gratitude was unspoken, but unmistakable. In that charged moment, Simone Clark had done more than reclaim her appointment. She had exposed the fragility of bias hiding behind procedure, forcing the hospital's own values into the light. The ripple of her resolve would soon sweep through St. Avalon's corridors and beyond into boardrooms where policy was crafted and into living rooms where stories of justice inspired change. And so Simone walked on her stride, steady, her purpose clear, ready to transform this personal affront into institutional reform, confident that when dignity demanded defense, she would answer the call. 10 minutes had passed since Simone Clark first set foot in the marbled lobby of St. Avalon Private Hospital, only to be met with cold dismissal. In that decade of moments, the initial shock and hurt she felt had crystallized into a precise resolve. Now she stood poised at the nexus of power and procedure, her mind racing through every boardroom ultimatum and regulatory clause she had ever invoked. Beneath the swirl of high-ceilinged opulence and hushed whispers, she tapped her discreet earpiece, summoning her executive machinery into motion. Her thumb hovered for a heartbeat over the slender silver cylinder before she pressed. "Initiate executive escalation." She whispered, her voice barely louder than the tick of the grand clock above the reception desk. "I want the board on this in 5. The words traveled through encrypted channels to her chief operating officer, a seasoned strategist who had orchestrated countless high-stakes negotiations on her behalf. Within seconds, a succinct acknowledgement pinged back, "Understood. Convening board via secure line." Her gaze flicked to the receptionist Lawson, who still sat behind the desk, her eyes red-rimmed and avoiding Simone's steady stare. The transformation of the lobby was palpable. What had been a place of routine check-ins had become an arena of escalating tension. Nurses, having exchanged glances over the reception counter, lingered in the hallway, their curiosity piqued. Patients in nearby chairs leaned forward in their seats, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The ambient murmur of aftercare instructions and paging announcements dulled to a background hum. Simone tapped her second message, this one directed at her legal counsel. "Document everything, prepare notice." The words, crisp and precise, set her legal team in motion, instructing them to secure logs of every digital entry record, every testimony and witness statement, and ready the formal notice that would legally bind the hospital's board to account for the affront. As the message flew through secure channels, it carried the weight of corporate law offices primed to enforce compliance and accountability. In that moment, the lobby felt suspended, its marble floors and gilded moldings reduced to silent witnesses of a confrontation larger than any one woman's appointment. Simone's presence was an assertion of authority that rippled outward. Even the high-resolution monitors behind the reception desk flickered, their content shifting abruptly from promotional slideshows of St. Avalon's advanced MRI suite to a notification executive escalation requested by Dr. Simone Clark, stamped in bold red across the display. The air crackled with that digital drumbeat, each flash a reminder that the hospital's own systems now recognized the seriousness of her demand. Without a word, Simone stepped back from the reception desk and let her posture do the talking. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, she surveyed the lobby. Lawson's eyes flickered up once, then darted away. The head nurse approached clipboard in hand, but paused a respectful distance from Simone's commanding silhouette. It was clear to everyone present that Dr. Clark held the initiative. Even the hospital's architecture, its soaring columns and vaulted ceilings, seemed to bow to the gravity of her presence. A soft chime from her earpiece alerted Simone to the first response. Her COO's voice, low and urgent, crackled through. "Board line is open. 5 executives standing by." She allowed herself the slightest nod of satisfaction, then turned her attention back to the lobby's human array. She could almost see the hospital's caste system, laid bare well-heeled patients in tailored suits clutching designer bags prone to command every courtesy. But here a CEO of a billion-dollar telemedicine firm had been reduced to supplicant. Simone would not let that stand. She strode toward the reception desk, her steps measured yet unyielding, each click of her heels on the polished stone floor echoing like the drumbeat of her strategy. Each second she moved closer, the murmur of the crowd grew, phones lifted ready to capture whatever came next. A local news reporter, tipped off anonymously, slipped from the adjacent cafe, smartphone in hand, and perched against a marble pillar. Behind her, a pair of interns from the hospital administration school exchanged whispers about non-discrimination policies and executive privilege. Simone's hand hovered just above the reception counter when she stopped. "Miss Lawson," she said, voice clear and resonant. "We are now 10 minutes into your unilateral cancellation. My COO and legal counsel are standing by. I suggest you call your director's office and request guidance. If you cannot provide a valid policy or written authorization for this action, I will escalate to the board and beyond if necessary." Her words dropped into the hush like stones into still water. The receptionist's face drained of color, her hands froze mid-type. Simone watched as Lawson fumbled for the phone at her elbow, dialing with shaky fingers. The line connected. Simone could make out the faint crackle of director's office before the receptionist's breathy apology. In those few seconds, Simone's legal team began logging the call metadata. Her COO confirmed that the board's secure line was active. As Lawson spoke into the receiver, Simone allowed herself to absorb the scene. The hospital's receptionists and nurses gathered, leaning forward. Doctors in white coats peered through glass door frames. Patients shifted in their chairs, the weight of justice settling on their shoulders. The lobby light seemed to dim around her, spotlighting Simone's figure, as though she were the protagonist of a courtroom drama unfolding in real time. Finally, Lawson hung up, eyes wide with contrition. She glanced at Simone, swallowed, then spoke in a voice just above a whisper. "Dr. Clark, I've been instructed to reinstate your appointment immediately and to ensure you're escorted personally." Her words spilled out, rushed at the edges, but they carried an implicit acknowledgement of error. Simone inclined her head, once accepting the concession but maintaining her vigil. "Thank you," she replied, voice firm. "I will proceed to the consultation room, and I expect a written apology and policy review memo delivered to me by the end of the day." At that exact moment, the earpiece in Simone's other ear crackled again. Her legal team confirming that the board had convened via video conference. Their digital faces flickering on the lobby monitor, the hospital's CEO, the board chair, and the general counsel, all prepared to address the dispute. The board's presence, albeit virtual, eclipsed Lawson's blockade. Simone allowed a small, knowing smile to curve her lips. The initial barrier was no more than an opening gambit. She had turned a personal slight into a matter of institutional urgency, mobilizing her corporate apparatus to hold the hospital accountable. In those 10 minutes, the lobby had transformed from a site of humiliation into a theater of corrective justice. As Simone turned toward the private hallway leading to her consultation, a ripple of applause, soft yet unmistakable, echoed from the assembled patients and staff. Simone paused at the threshold, looking back to ensure that her actions had sown the seeds of lasting change. The receptionist, now pale but resolute, offered a terse nod of respect. Simone nodded in return, then stepped forward, her tailored lab coat swishing behind her like a banner of triumph. In the corridor beyond the head, nurse flanked her, ready to guide her to the consultation suite. Each step Simone took carried the power of precedent. In 10 minutes, she had shown that dignity could not be overridden by protocol, and that prejudice masquerading as procedure could be dismantled by decisive action. The digital drumbeat of her strategy still thrummed in the lobby, a reminder that accountability waits for no one, and that when wronged, a single individual with resolve and resources can rewrite the rules of an entire institution. In the span of a heartbeat, the grand lobby of St. Avalon Private Hospital transformed from a polished antechamber of luxury into a charged arena of high-stakes confrontation. Dr. Simone Clark. Her posture still measured and unwavering, watched as two figures approached with purposeful stride: Marcus Lee, her longtime legal counsel, and Marisol Mari Nguyen, her razor-sharp PR director. Both moved with the quiet confidence of seasoned operatives, their expressions blending respect for Simone's resolve with readiness to execute the next phase of her strategy. Marcus Lee, a tall man in a charcoal suit whose presence seemed to fill the vaulted space around him, carried a slim leather portfolio under one arm. His eyes flicked to Simone's, offering a curt nod, the signal that every digital log, every witness statement, and every policy excerpt was already being compiled and time-stamped by his remote team. Mari Nguyen glided in behind him, smartphone poised, her other hand pinching a discreet microphone clipped to her lapel. Her face was coolly professional, but the spark in her eyes betrayed her anticipation. The moment for controlled amplification had arrived. At Mari's touch, the lobby's ambient noise subtly shifted. The faint hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of nurses' uniforms receded, replaced by the low, persistent whir of a live stream starting up. Mari's phone, held at a precise angle, began transmitting across social channels live from St. Avalon Executive Escalation in progress. Within seconds, comments appeared in an overlay at the bottom of the screen. What's happening? Is that Simone Clark? This is going to blow up. Each new ping of incoming viewers seemed to echo off the marble floors. Simone acknowledged the swell of public interest with a single measured breath. She turned slightly, allowing the camera to capture the full sweep of the lobby, the ornate chandelier suspended over polished oak floors, the stained glass windows flooding the space with amber twilight, the rows of gleaming reception panels now flickering with the hospital's internal alerts. In that frame, she was both protagonist and judge, her calm authority a stark counterpoint to the receptionist's earlier hesitation. Mari's voice, modulated to be clear but not loud enough to break the immersive hush, narrated, "Good afternoon. I'm Marisol Nguyen, Public Relations Director for Vital Core Health. We're here today because Dr. Simone Clark was unjustly denied her confirmed appointment. She's requested immediate policy review, and we'll bring you each development as it happens." Her words rippled through the lobby's charged atmosphere like the overture to a corporate verdict. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of legal gravitas. St. Avalon's Patient Rights Charter, he began addressing the receptionist and any onlookers who might overhear explicitly, guarantees all confirmed patients access to care without discrimination. We have already sent a formal notice to the board chair demanding written justification for this denial within 1 hour pending further action. He placed the leather portfolio on a low reception table and opened it, revealing printed packets bound with a crimson ribbon policy, excerpts, appointment logs, time-stamped emails, and witness affidavits from nurses who had quietly agreed to testify that Simone's slot had been there and then erased without cause. The receptionist, Lawson, hovered behind the desk, her earlier confidence evaporated. She swallowed, pressing a trembling finger to the intercom that linked to the director's office. "Yes, I have Dr. Clark's counsel and PR director here. They've requested immediate board notification. They're asserting a violation of patient rights." Her voice cracked, betraying her panic. Simone seized the moment, stepping toward the desk. "Miss Lawson," she said, voice level but firm, "you will escort me personally to my consultation room, and you will confirm that my appointment is honored. Then you will deliver to me in writing the names of every individual who authorized my cancellation." She paused, scanning the assembled staff and patients whose attention now seemed wholly captured. This institution's reputation rests on its commitment to healing all patients, all backgrounds. I intend to ensure that commitment is upheld. A murmur of approval rippled through the gathering crowd. A nurse wearing a freshly starched uniform approached discreetly, her badge reading ER Triage. She slipped Simone a small note. "I witnessed the deletion." "Happy to testify." Simone folded the note into her palm, a subtle affirmation of solidarity that only those attuned to the stakes would recognize. Meanwhile, Mari's livestream continued to capture each beat of the drama. Viewers' comments rolled in by the hundreds. Finally, someone standing up. "You go, Dr. Clark. St. Avalon is in trouble now." Social media influencers texting from the lobby's side pews began tagging news outlets, and the hospital's own internal communication system buzzed with alerts. Urgent board notification initiated press feeds, active legal escalation in progress. Marcus nodded at the receptionist's intercom fumblings. "If we do not receive the requested documentation and reinstatement within the next 10 minutes, we will proceed with legal injunction to secure my client's right to access care." His words landed like verdict gavel strikes, the lobby's suspended breath exhaling in unison. Then, from the fringes of the lobby, a subtle shift occurred. The hospital director, Dr. Vivian Morrow, emerged from the mirrored glass doors leading to the administrative suite. Flanked by 2 security chiefs, she stepped into the unsettled throng, her expression a carefully composed mask of concern. Her tailored blazer, though impeccable, could not conceal the tension evident in her tight jaw and narrowed eyes. She approached Simone with measured steps, her gaze sweeping over the legal counsel, the PR director, and the captive audience of staff and patients. Dr. Clark. Dr. Morrow began voice-controlled but clearly strained. I apologize for the confusion and distress you've experienced. I have just been informed of your counsel's notice. Please understand that we value every patient, especially those of your caliber and contribution to healthcare innovation. She paused, glancing at Marion's live stream camera. And we understand that this situation requires immediate resolution. Simone inclined her head, once acknowledging the director's concession, but not yet yielding her initiative. Thank you, Dr. Morrow, she replied evenly. I appreciate your prompt attention. I trust that you will honor my appointment and deliver the requested documentation. Her words were both conciliatory and regal, a blend of grace and authority that underscored her control of the moment. Dr. Morrow gestured to Lawson, who stepped forward with a trembling apology. Please, Dr. Clark, follow me. We have a private consultation room ready, and my office will deliver the materials you requested. She led the way through a pair of carved wooden doors into a corridor bathed in soft lamplight. As Simone, flanked by her allies, moved past the reception area, the lobby's atmosphere began to settle. Marcus closed his portfolio, and Mari clicked off the live stream with a satisfied nod. Enough evidence gathered, enough public pressure applied. In their wake, staff and patients exchanged relieved glances, the tension diffusing into the space like heat dissipating after a storm. Once behind closed doors, Simone allowed herself a single deep breath. The confrontation had been swift, surgical, and effective. In minutes, she had mobilized her legal and public relations teams, transformed a moment of personal indignity into corporate accountability, and compelled the hospital's leadership to rectify their biased refusal. The lobby, once a site of humiliation, had become the stage for her triumph. As the doors clicked shut behind them, Simone's voice softened just enough for her counsel and PR director to hear. Well done, she said, offering Marcus and Mari each a small appreciative smile. Let's ensure the board follows through and that policy changes are permanent. No one else should face what I just did. Marcus tapped his temple, then slipped his phone from his pocket. I've already drafted the board notice for your signature, Simone. Once it's sent, we'll monitor compliance. Any deviation, and we file. Mari checked her phone's notifications. Stream peaked at 12K live viewers, she reported. Clips already trending. She looked up, meeting Simone's eyes. We've got the public on our side. The hospital's reputation overhaul starts now. Simone nodded, her resolve unshaken. Then let's make sure they deliver. Equity in healthcare is non-negotiable. In that quiet consultation corridor, the magnitude of their rapid mobilization settled upon them. In 10 minutes, Simone Clark had not only reclaimed her own right to care, but had set in motion a broader reckoning, an unmistakable message that dignity once denied would be demanded and defended with every resource at her command. 15 minutes after the initial snub at the reception desk, St. Avalon's lavish boardroom doors swung open with a muted fanfare of anticipation. Simone Clark's entourage, a tight formation of legal counsel, Marcus Lee PR Director Marisol Nguyen, and two observant board members of Vital Core Health entered the marble-floored chamber where the hospital's leadership was already assembled. The air was thick with the uneasy hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of footsteps in the hallway beyond. At the head of the long, polished oak table stood Chairman Robert Langley, his gray-streaked hair and impeccably pressed suit conveying decades of institutional gravitas. Flanking him were St. Avalon's Chief Medical Officer and the Director of Patient Experience, each clutching folders stamped with the hospital crest. Their expressions melded curiosity with apprehension as they recognized the woman who had only minutes earlier been turned away at the front desk. Simone paused in the threshold, her tailored cream blazer reflecting the boardroom's soft glow. She exhaled, centering herself in the center of the room as if standing on a stage. Every seat faced her now. The whispered buzz of uncertainty quieted to a heavy silence. The waiting board members exchanged nervous glances as though waiting for the opening notes of a symphony before they dared breathe. With a single fluid motion, Simone removed her gloves and placed them atop the glossy table. She surveyed the faces before her, some lined with years of leadership, Others still fresh with corporate wide-eyed idealism, and allowed her gaze to land on Chairman Langley. Her voice when she spoke was calm and unequivocal, resonating like a call to order. "Thank you all for assembling on such short notice," she began, her tone measured but carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of steel. "I'm here because earlier today I was denied entry to an appointment that had been confirmed weeks in advance. I was turned away at your reception with no explanation, no record of a cancellation, and no apology." She let the weight of that indignity settle across the room before continuing. That moment spoke volumes about this institution's failure to protect the dignity of every patient regardless of status, background, or contribution to the community. Marcus Lee stepped forward, placing a leather-bound dossier before Chairman Langley. Inside this packet, you will find time-stamped communications, witness affidavits, and policy excerpts attesting to Dr. Clark's confirmed appointment. We have given your administration every opportunity to rectify this error internally. Yet 15 minutes after the incident, we have received no substantive clarification or apology. He paused to meet each board member's gaze. Instead, we were met with silence. A murmur rippled among the executives. Langley's poker face tightened. Simone raised a hand and the rustle of shifting chairs ceased. "This is not merely about me," she continued. "It is about the principle that no patient should ever be made invisible by prejudice disguised as protocol." She leaned forward, hands pressed to the table's smooth surface. "Therefore effective immediately. I'm invoking Vital Core Health's Emergency Governance Clause. This board is hereby dissolved and reconstituted under a new non-discrimination charter. Should you fail to comply within 24 hours, we will initiate legal action to enforce patient rights file for injunctive relief and publicize this breach of trust to media outlets worldwide." Langley's jaw clenched as he flipped through the dossier. The room was motionless, phenomenal stillness that crackled with collective astonishment. Here stood Dr. Simone Clark, a force of nature in a crisply tailored suit, unmoved by the legacy and power arrayed against her. Silence stretched impossible to break without boldness. Finally, it was the director of patient experience, a younger executive named Elaine Byrne, who spoke. Her voice wavered initially but grew steadier as she found courage in Simone's resolve. "Dr. Clark," she said, "your points are compelling. We recognize the gravity of what has transpired. The board will convene an emergency session to draft the charter you've demanded. We will commit to structured oversight to ensure no patient's dignity is ever compromised again." Langley cleared his throat, stepping forward with slow deliberation. He placed his hand on the dossier and met Simone's unwavering gaze. "Dr. Clark, on behalf of this board, I offer our sincere apologies. We accept your terms. The reconstitution will begin immediately, and a new policy framework will be in place within 24 hours. His voice was firm, but Simone detected the tremor of concession beneath its measured cadence. A collective exhalation swept the boardroom. Marisol Nguyen allowed herself the slightest of smiles as she pocketed her phone, her live stream capturing the pivotal moment. Marcus Lee closed his portfolio with a quiet click, the sound echoing the finality of the resolution. Simone sat at the head of the table, a rare concession, but one she accepted with professional grace. The newly convened leadership team gathered around her, already drafting next steps on sleek laptops. In that charged atmosphere, what began as a moment of personal humiliation had been transmuted into institutional transformation. The boardroom's tension dissolved into purposeful energy. Simone glanced at her counsel and PR lead, their nods affirming the exercise of strategic teamwork. Then she addressed the assembled executives one final time. "Let this be a lesson that dignity is not a privilege, it's a right. Never again may protocol be wielded to silence the voices it should protect. I look forward to our collaboration in shaping a policy that enshrines equity at every level of patient care." Langley offered a curt bow of his head, the board members echoing the gesture. The storm had broken. The hospital's governance had shifted beneath Simone's unwavering leadership. In one bold overture, the CEO of Vital Core Health had not only reclaimed her own dignity, but reorchestrated the rules of an entire institution. As the board began drafting the new non-discrimination charter, Simone allowed herself a solitary, triumphant breath. 15 minutes had been all it took to dissolve a legacy of oversight and rebuild it anew on the bedrock of justice. And in that moment, St. Avalon Private Hospital was forever changed, and so too was the measure of what it meant to lead with unyielding resolve. The boardroom's door swung closed behind Chairman Langley as he retreated to finalize the newly drafted charter, his footsteps echoing down the polished corridor. In his wake, an electric hush descended over St. Avalon's grand lobby, transforming its usual bustle into a tableau of stunned anticipation. Glass-walled reception cubicles, marble floors that gleamed like liquid silver, and the softly ticking art installation once meant to soothe anxious patients now served as silent witnesses to a moment of seismic change. Smartphones appeared in hands like reflexes, no longer tools for idle scrolling, but instruments of accountability. Visitors raised their devices in unison, recording the subtle drama unfolding. Simone Clark, standing with poised calm behind the reception desk, where she had been snubbed only an hour before her wind-blown lab coat, now settled into composed drapery. Next to her PR director, Marisol Nguyen tapped furiously on a tablet, confirming that the chairman's memorandum was being transmitted to every administrative terminal in the hospital network. Counsel Marcus Lee observed the scene with a proud yet private smile, his gaze flicking to the floor-to-ceiling monitors that lined the lobby walls. As the draft resolution was signed electronically, the animated screen shimmered to life. In bold white letters on a deep blue background, the message scrolled in seamless loop: St. Avalon Private Hospital, policy under revision. All patient scheduling decisions subject to equitable review, effective immediately. A ripple of murmurs coursed through the assembled spectators, patients pausing by the concierge desk, nurses mid-step between wards, and even the stern-faced security officers relaxing their postures. The flicker of the announcement on each monitor seemed to pulse in time with the collective heartbeat of the room. Here was proof that injustice once called out in this hallowed space could not stand. Behind the reception desk, Simone allowed herself a modest nod of satisfaction, though her eyes remained vigilant. She watched as the head receptionist, formerly the agent of her humiliation, stepped forward to read the proclamation. The woman's cheeks flushed with a mixture of relief and embarrassment, her earlier defiance now replaced by a silent acknowledgement of the new order. Simone's voice, cool and measured, cut through the low hum of astonished whispers. "Thank you," she said, addressing the receptionist with quiet authority. "I appreciate your cooperation in implementing these guidelines. Patients come here seeking care and comfort, not to be treated as conveniences within an algorithm." The receptionist mumbled assent, her eyes downcast but resolute. A small group of nurses, heretofore hidden behind glass partitions, edged closer, offering supportive smiles. One placed a gentle hand on the receptionist's shoulder, an unspoken gesture of solidarity. It would be the first of many such gestures in the days to come. Meanwhile, Marisol tapped the tablet, dispatching a press release to local media outlets and the hospital's own intranet bulletin. Within moments, the headline appeared on lobby terminals and in the notification feeds of hospital staff. St. Avalon adopts equitable scheduling review in landmark policy change. Email alerts pinged in quiet offices, executive suites, and even the janitorial break room spreading the news like wildfire through the institution's veins. Simone adopted a steadying breath as she watched the transformation complete. The VIP fast-track line, once closed to her, was now repurposed into a universal check-in queue open to every patient regardless of insurance tier or personal connection. The velvet rope that had once blocked her path was folded away, replaced by a simple rope barrier designed to guide rather than exclude. A nearby concierge retrieved fresh signage announcing "Welcome all equity and access" with crisp professionalism. Patients began to approach the desk, drawn by the promise of fair treatment. A young father with a fussy toddler in tow offered Simone a grateful nod as he stepped forward to confirm his son's vaccination appointment. An elderly couple, their arms entwined in support, approached next, their relief plain in their softened features. Simone returned each gesture with a gracious smile, demonstrating that leadership could be both powerful and compassionate. Off to one side, a cluster of surgeons and department heads peered through a glass door into the lobby. Their stethoscopes and white coats commanded respect, yet they now paused in silent tribute to a CEO whose influence had transcended corporate agreements to bring about real human dignity. One surgeon raised his coffee cup in salute. A nurse mouthed thank you in wordless appreciation. The hospital's executive offices, typically sterile and insulated, were now enlivened by a palpable sense of purpose. Internally, administrators gathered in huddles discussing the exact language of the charter's equitable review process. They debated the makeup of the oversight committee. Simone had demanded representatives from patient advocacy groups, frontline nursing staff, and legal counsel to ensure that no scheduling decision would ever again slip into arbitrary exclusion. In the visitors' lounge, a hand-carved mahogany alcove with overstuffed leather sofas, a late-arriving patient surveyed the lobby monitors. Her appointment card, once marked canceled, was now validated by the new policy. She closed her phone after confirming the good news and exhaled a long-held breath. For her and countless others, the resolution was more than a procedural tweak. It was a reaffirmation that respect must be foundational to care. At the center of this transformation, Simone Clark stood like the eye of a storm, calm and unshakable. She allowed herself a moment to reflect. Earlier that day, she had been reduced to a footnote in someone else's scheduling system, an oversight that cut deeper because of the color of her skin and the weight of her achievements. Yet in less than 45 minutes, she had not only secured her own dignity, but rewritten the rules for everyone who followed. Marcus Lee approached her quietly. All systems updated, he reported, his voice a low reassurance. The Oversight Committee's first meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. All references to instant cancellations without written justification have been removed from the standard operating procedures. Simone offered a soft nod. Good, she replied. This is just the beginning. True equity requires ongoing vigilance. Marisol stepped forward, clicking her tablet shut. We're streaming live reactions to our social channels now. The sentiment's overwhelmingly positive. #Avalon Justice is already trending. Simone allowed herself a rare, genuine smile. Then let's ensure the promise matches the headlines. With that, she turned back to the reception desk, where a single white orchid, once a purely decorative flourish, now symbolized transformation in action. She pressed a gentle fingertip to one of its petals, an unspoken vow to protect the dignity of every patient under this hospital's care. The lobby's ambient lighting shifted, with the late afternoon sun casting long, warm rays across the marble floors. As Simone Clark stepped away from the desk, her figure cut a resolute silhouette against the softly glowing monitors. The once oppressive grandeur of St. Avalon's lobby had been purged of its silent snubs. In its place, a new standard of equity had been stamped into policy and practice. Visitors and staff alike paused to watch her pass, acknowledging the CEO whose decisive action had realigned the hospital's moral compass. She moved toward the exit with measured grace, every step a testament to the power of principled leadership. Behind her, the lobby buzzed with renewed energy, an echo of transformation that would reverberate through every ward office and corridor. And as the monitors continued to display the bright affirmative message of policy under revision, the air in St. Avalon Private Hospital carried a new promise that no patient would ever again be barred without cause, and that every life-seeking care would be met with the respect it deserved. In that instant, Simone Clark's swift, unwavering action had not only resolved an immediate injustice, but it also set a beacon for what dignity and equality should look like in healthcare and beyond. The corridors of St. Avalon Private Hospital seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief as news of the policy overhaul spread far beyond the marble lobby. Inside the cardiology wing, Dr. Anika Patel paused mid-chart note, her stethoscope heavy around her neck as a nurse's tablet buzzed with the morning's headline, #Simone Effect St. Avalon Embraces Equitable Patient Access. The nurse looked up, eyes bright with approval, and nodded respectfully at Dr. Patel, who in turn offered a quiet smile, one colleague to another, recognizing that this change would touch every patient file, every scheduling decision, and every moment of vulnerability that walked through the hospital's doors. In the oncology treatment center, patients huddled in small groups during infusion drips, their IV poles, and chemotherapy bags momentarily forgotten as they checked their phones. The hashtag had journeyed from social media feeds into the hushed voices of those reclining in recliners. Did you see one patient whispered voice hoarse from treatment? They actually did it, no more last-minute cancellations without reason. A ripple of hope passed through the room, as if the policy change represented not just fair scheduling, but a rekindling of trust in the institution that promised to heal. Upstairs, the executive offices buzzed with purpose. Marcus Lee Simone's general counsel marshaled a team of compliance officers to finalize the charter for the newly formed Equitable Access Oversight Committee. They debated the precise language, how soon an appeal must be filed after a scheduling decision, what documentation would be required for truly exceptional protocol deviations, and how to ensure that the committee itself remained diverse and unbiased. Every keystroke, every clause added, felt weighty with responsibility. This was no mere bureaucratic formality, but a living document that would safeguard patients' dignity for years to come. Down in the cafeteria, food service staff clustered around the television mounted in the corner, as the local business channel aired a segment lauding St. Avalon's masterful pivot and Simone Clark's decisive leadership. The cook ladling soup into bowls whispered with genuine admiration. That CEO. She didn't just complain, she fixed it. The dishwasher, taking a moment to wipe her hands, nodded. That's the power of standing up no matter who you are. Across town, medical journals released online editorials breaking down the legal and ethical implications of the rapid policy reversal. One health policy analyst wrote, "In a culture where patient equity is often an afterthought, the #Simone effect represents a watershed moment. It shows that structural change can happen at the speed of accountability, not red tape." Through their peer-reviewed lenses, academics dissected Simone's actions, framing them as a case study in corporate social responsibility, an exemplar for hospital boards worldwide. Meanwhile, in the halls of hospital administration, the Board of Trustees convened an emergency meeting. The trustees, some still nursing bruised egos from being publicly overruled, now faced a choice: fully embrace the reform or risk reputational fallout. As they gathered around the polished oaken table, each member carried the weight of Simone's ultimatum. In a unanimous vote, they ratified the new charter, adding Simone's name to the board's history as the leader who initiated a paradigm shift. That decision was swiftly webcast to staff via the hospital intranet, accompanied by a message from Simone herself. "Thank you for your commitment to dignity and care. Together we will ensure that equity guides every interaction from the first hello to the final goodbye." Back in the lobby, now quiet, bathed in soft afternoon light, Simone Clark finally passed through the double doors that had once barred her. Though the marble floor and hushed ambiance were unchanged, everything felt different. Friends among the reception staff offered genuine smiles. Patients waiting for appointments returned her nods with respect rather than indifference. Even the security officer at the entrance, who had earlier averted his gaze, stood to attention in a small salute as she walked by. Simone allowed herself a moment to absorb it all: the solidarity among staff, the gratitude from patients, and the knowledge that a single act of unwavering resolve had rippled outward to transform an entire institution. She paused at the concierge desk, where a printed copy of the policy revision lay framed under glass for all to see, a permanent testament to the day dignity won. In that charged moment, a teenager clutching her mother's hand approached. The girl's eyes, wide with curiosity, met Simone's. "Are you the CEO who made them change the rules?" she asked, her voice innocent but earnest. Simone knelt to the girl's level and nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "Everyone deserves respect, especially when they're feeling sick or scared." The girl beamed and waved before scampering back to her mother, who mouthed "thank you" with a tearful smile. As Simone rose and turned to leave, the lobby's monitors flickered once more with the everlasting message: "Equitable review in effect. No appointment, cancellations without written justification." And in that echoing refrains of justice fulfilled, St. Avalon's grand lobby had become more than a place of arrival and departure. It stood as a sanctuary where equality and care would forever walk hand in hand. By the time Friday's sunrise gilded the skyline, St. Avalon's revolution had leapt beyond its marble walls and into hospitals and clinics across the nation. Word of Dr. Simone Clark's unflinching demand for equitable check-in policies spread like wildfire through executive suites and faculty lounges, igniting discussions on patient dignity in institutions from coast to coast. Within days, at least a dozen major healthcare networks announced formal reviews of their own scheduling and admissions protocols, citing St. Avalon's newly minted equity framework as the benchmark for inclusive care. In boardrooms overlooking city streets, hospital CEOs pored over the four-page charter Simone forced into existence, nodding at clauses that guaranteed written justification for any appointment changes and required frontline staff training on implicit bias. If St. Avalon can rewrite its rulebook in under a quarter hour, one executive mused at a National Health Systems Summit, we owe it to our communities to match that speed. Their murmur rippled into commitment letters. Within 72 hours, cross-institutional working groups were convened tasked with translating Simone's emergency memorandum into their own policy platforms. Meanwhile, at the nation's leading medical schools, deans rearranged lecture schedules to include the St. Avalon incident in ethics seminars. In a vaulted lecture hall at Northbridge University, Dr. Javier Morales paused his PowerPoint patient rights and institutional accountability to display a clip of the Marble Lobby's Marble Lobby confrontation. Observe how a single act of moral clarity, he told 200 aspiring physicians, can alter the trajectory of an entire organization. Dr. Simone Clark's story isn't merely about boardroom drama. It is a testament to the power each of you holds from your first day in scrubs to your last day on the bench. Across social media with hashtags like #SimoneStandard and #HealthEquity. Now, patient advocates shared personal anecdotes of last-minute cancellations and unexplained slot shifts. Their posts formed a mosaic of frustration and hope. My mom's chemotherapy session was once pushed back without warning, wrote one user. If Simone can make this right, maybe other hospitals will too. Another wrote, I used to dread making appointments. Now I know I have a voice. In comment threads beneath national news articles, healthcare workers added their own perspectives. This change boosts our morale, typed a charge nurse. We want to heal patients, not gatekeep them. Back at St. Avalon, the newly formed Equity and Access Oversight Committee met in a bright conference room overlooking the city hospital towers. Its members, representatives drawn from administration, nursing, patient advocacy, and community leaders reviewed the first week's Data Zero unjust cancellations recorded, all scheduling disputes resolved within 24 hours and patient satisfaction scores already climbing. Each figure reinforced the epilogue of Simone Clark's quarter-hour confrontation that structural reform demanded both urgency and oversight. In her office, Simone sat behind her large mahogany desk, scrolling through the committee's dashboard. She paused at a chart showing a 32% increase in on-time admissions for minority patients, a metric that spoke more profoundly than any press release. She leaned back, the late afternoon light warming her features, and allowed herself a moment of reflection. The fight had begun at a single receptionist's desk. Now it thrived in the bylaws and board minutes of facilities she'd never visited. The ripple had widened beyond hospital halls to shape policy conversations in state legislatures. 2 governors publicly pledged to convene task forces on healthcare equity, referencing St. Avalon's framework as their guiding light. Simone's phone buzzed with a text from the Medical Ethics Council, an invitation to speak at their annual symposium. She tapped a quick reply. Happy to share our journey. Let's ensure equitable care becomes the rule, not the exception. Simultaneously, her COO sent a summary of incoming partnership offers. Nonprofits, insurers, patient rights organizations, all eager to adopt St. Avalon's model. The inbox hummed with possibilities, a white paper in the works, a collaborative online portal for equity policy templates, and even a documentary filmmaker seeking permission to capture the movement on film. The final piece fell into place that evening when Simone attended a small ceremony in the hospital's grand hall. There, under a soft spotlight, the Board of Trustees presented her with a commemorative plaque in recognition of vision, courage, and unwavering commitment to equity, Dr. Simone Clark Catalyst for Change. Colleagues, nurses, administrative staff, and patients gathered in the rows of seats, rising in applause as Simone accepted the honor. She stepped to the podium, her CEO badge now bearing a faint scratch, a reminder of the moment her identity was questioned and of the reform she had galvanized in its wake. Her remarks were simple, yet carried the weight of every patient turned away before her stand. Thank you. This plaque symbolizes not just my actions, but our collective resolve to honor every person who walks through these doors. Let St. Avalon's transformation serve as proof that prejudice, once confronted, can be transformed into policy, and that dignity once denied can be codified in stone and spirit alike. The applause swelled. Among the audience, the very receptionist whose blank cursor had sparked the crisis watched with tears in her eyes, silently acknowledging the change she had helped birth by resisting it. Down the aisle, a former patient gripped Simone's hand, whispering thanks through his own tears of relief, grateful that from this day forward, no one else would suffer that quiet cruelty. As the hall lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed into the corridors of a new standard, Simone Clark lingered for a moment, gazing at the plaque's etched words. The quarter-hour firestorm that had erupted at the reception desk had rippled outward to reshape an entire industry's approach to care. In boardrooms, classrooms, and hospital wards, the epilogue of her stand had been written in policy practice and hearts alike, forever linking one Black CEO's refusal to be erased with a sweeping new era of healthcare equity.